The difference between ضاد and ظاء is probably one of the most controversial topics, but it is surely one of the most widespread misconceptions among many Muslims around the world. There are several opinions and theories about it. This lesson is meant to tackle this problem comprehensively and give clear answers on this question, inshallah. So let's start from the beginning, and for those who don't know, what exactly is the problem with ضاد and ظاء? Well, the problem is that there are many people who think that ضاد and ظاء are pronounced the same or very similarly to each other. And importantly, they also say that we are supposed to recite the Quran like that. And they even claim that this is how the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, read the Quran. So this means that according to this claim, the word فضل should be pronounced as فضل, or a similar sound to the original ظاء, as in the word ظلال. So at the end of the day, they would sound identical or very similar. And they give the name الضاد الفصيحة, or I should be saying الضاد الفصيحة, or in English, the eloquent ضاد, to pronouncing ضاد and ظاء very similarly. So let's start by answering the most important question. Is this correct? And can we read the Quran like that? Well, let's start from the second question. Can we recite the Quran like that? And the answer is simply no. You cannot recite the Quran like that. Why? Because this is considered as a clear mistake, or لحن جلي, which is something that we talked about in this lesson. So check it out if you want to have more information. لحن جلي cannot be made when reciting the Quran, and it should be avoided at all times. So you should never read the Quran like that. But why is that? Well, there are several reasons. One, reading the Quran like that will almost certainly change the meaning of the ayah, and sometimes it will be changed completely. So in Surah Al-Fatiha, in the last ayah, we say, صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. But if you mispronounce ضاد as ضاد and say ولا الضالين, it will change the meaning of the ayah from those who have gone astray, which is the original meaning, to those who have stayed. And that is not the intended meaning that Allah wanted us to learn and recite every day. So this was the first reason. It can change the meaning of the ayah. So does that mean that if it doesn't change the meaning of the ayah, then it would be okay? Well, this would take us to the second reason. The second reason is that the Quran was passed down to us orally, word for word, sound for sound. And this is not how it was passed down to us. ضاد and ظاء were passed down to us as two separate sounds. But how can we tell? Well, because our shuyukh taught us the way they were taught, and their own shuyukh taught them the way they were taught, and so on until we reached the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. And besides that, let us consider this ayah as an example. These two words here are identical, except for one letter, which is the ضاد or the ظاء. So if we don't differentiate between ضاد and ظاء, and we would pronounce them similarly, this ayah would sound like this. وجوه يومئذ ناظرة إلى ربها ناظرة. And that is, of course, a mistake. But let us imagine for a second that these two words were indeed pronounced similarly. How was it then possible to orally pass down two different words if they sound exactly the same? If that was the case, then they would have looked the same as well. But since both of these words are indeed pronounced differently, and that is the correct pronunciation, that's why they reached us as two different words. So that's why we should say وجوه يومئذ ناظرة إلى ربها ناظرة. But now you might be wondering, if these are two different letters, then where did this problem come from? Well, first, it is a fact that some Arabs, especially in some parts in the Arabian Peninsula, who do pronounce dad and dha very similarly. That is their dialect. But that's not how they read the Quran, nor should they read it using their dialect. It is also a fact that some Arabs, especially in the southern parts of the Arabian Peninsula, who pronounce qaf as g. But they will never read this ayah, قالت الأعراب آمنا. They would never read this word as قالت. They never do that, because you can't use your dialect to read the Quran, since this is not how the Quran was revealed. And to understand this even better, let us see a real-life example. This example is for one of the most important Muslim scholars nowadays, Sheikh Othman Al-khamis. He is originally from Al-Kuwait. Let us see how he pronounces the dad as dha when he speaks normally.
من عثمان رضي الله عنه من عثمان رضي الله عنه على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لأنه كان يخبر الحاضر.
You may want to decrease the speed of the video through the YouTube settings if you want to listen to this in even slower speed. Now let's see how he's going to recite the Quran and pronounce the dad as dad.
وهو الذي جعلكم خلائف الأرض ورفع بعضكم فوق بعض درجات وهو الذي جعلكم خلائف الأرض ورفع بعضكم فوق بعض درجات.
So, in conclusion, this pronunciation of dad does exist, but it is a dialect that cannot be used with the Quran. The second reason why this problem existed is that there were mentions from early Arabic grammarians like Sibawayhi, who gave a description to the dad in his book which was very similar to the dha. But there are three problems in this claim. First, we cannot put a description of a sound above an-naql wal-mushafaha of the Quran, or in English, the Quran oral tradition of passing it down letter for letter. The second problem is, some Arabs do pronounce it like he described it. It is not just the standard form, and more importantly, not the way to go with the Quran. And third, sounds are not learned or passed down by writing. They have to be heard and imitated so that you can get the idea of how they sound like. So I cannot just make a book about how to pronounce a certain sound and then expect that you would understand it completely and know how to say it properly. You have to hear it first and see the mouth movement before you can produce the sound. Finally, all what was mentioned is not the biggest problem when it comes to this issue, since this mistake has actually led to even bigger problems, specifically for our brothers and sisters whose first language is not Arabic and don't have the sound th in their mother tongue, or they don't know how to pronounce it properly yet. So what happened is, they would want to pronounce dad as dha mistakenly, but instead they end up pronouncing it as z, not dha, because they're not used to placing the tongue between the teeth or on one side of the teeth to pronounce the dha sound properly. So instead of saying dal or dhal, as it is mispronounced by some Arabs, they would end up saying zal. And that is even a bigger mistake, because it changes the meaning even further from what it is. And the Quran should never be read like that. And this is actually where the word Ramadan comes from. Originally, it is Ramadan. Some Arabs pronounce it as Ramadan, and then it de-evolved into Ramazan, because some people cannot pronounce the dha properly. And sometimes we can even see names like Riza has came to existence as it is some sort of an evolution from the original word, which is Rida. So what should we do now? Well, what you should do is to try your best to pronounce dha properly, or anything that is similar to this sound, because that would be the next best thing. And in order to learn the proper techniques of the articulation of these two sounds, I highly recommend checking out these two videos in which I explain the technique of pronunciation in great detail with many examples. And if you would like a head-to-head explanation for the articulation of these two sounds or other sounds, please let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you want to start your journey to learn the Tajweed of the Quran, you can click on this link. And if you want to understand the Quran in Arabic, then you should click on that link. And finally, I hope you've learned something new today, and I will see you next time.